Well, hello there, everyone. This is Mazske Finance coming to you from South Florida. It is Saturday, December the 3rd, year 2022. And I have a very special guest with me here today. And so we'll get started talking to him. And so Dave, Dividend Dave, as you know, how you doing today?
I'm great, Mark. Thank you for having me. I've been watching your videos for quite some time. And so it's always fun to actually be here. And thank you for the invite.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate you watching my channel. I love it when you comment on my videos. So to kick this off, Dave, why don't you just kind of go back in time a little bit? Tell us a little bit about who you are and where you came from and kind of what led you up to more recent times.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I'm Washington State native. I grew up in a small place called Bellingham, Washington. I guess it's about 90,000, and it's up there about an hour and a half north of Seattle. They're hugging the West Coast. My career-wise, I'm in accounting and more specifically tax. And so, I grew up doing art, doing some writing, that kind of thing. So I don't know how I got into doing tax and that kind of thing. I guess it just kind of seemed like a fun puzzle solving kind of thing. And the more I got into it, I really liked it. Well, that interest in tax got me a couple of jobs, one of which was very focused on doing tax returns for high net worth individuals. And so, before I took this job, I really had that whole, I guess you can say, if you reference the Matrix kind of thing, blue pill mentality, just going along with everyone else, just, having the same kind of American dream, finding a career, getting a house, having the kids, retiring, and then, having your life to yourself in your 60s or 70s now, maybe even your 80s by the time I retire. But so I had that, and I always felt like I just had kind of like the blinders on after I discovered this world of investment through this job where I was doing high net worth individual tax returns. And they were bringing they had all these partnerships and different things. They had all this income that wasn't like W-2 income, wasn't going to, punching the clock kind of thing. And, a lot of them were brokerage things like dividends and that kind of thing. And it really got me thinking. And so I bought my first, I think it's 2020, I bought my first stock. Before that, I thought stock was like going to the casino, right? I just didn't want to touch it or anything like that. So when I saw people having these broker statements that were just like hundreds of pages, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and these dividend payments, I started looking up at, these dividend payments and what they were. I'm like, wow, they're getting paid for like holding a stock, and that's pretty much it. I'm like, okay. So I bought my stock. It wasn't a dividend paying stock, but that was probably my first step into the world of investment. And so I took that, and, at that time I was watching a lot of YouTube, not necessarily educationally, but it wasn't quite YouTube University, but I took that thought, I typed in, okay, dividend paying stocks, dividend aristocrats, all that kind of stuff that came up. And, as YouTube is very suggestive to keep you watching different things, and to also, since dividends were in the realm of are in the realm of investing, they suggested other things. And some of those were real estate. And now I've always wanted to have a house, even since I was maybe 10 or so. So I've always wanted to buy a house, but I always wanted to buy it to live in it. I never wanted to buy it so it could make me money. So, I came across the podcast that I'm sure everyone knows about, Bigger Pockets. And I saw people like Todd Baldwin and others, and how they're making all this money from real estate. I'm like, okay, that sounds good, because my mindset was really also about, well, I have all these side projects. I like to be creative. I'm writing stuff. I have different things, but I'm working in tax. During tax season, you just really don't see anyone. It's just you're working 14, 15, 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for a couple months. So I'm like, okay, wow, I really want to make some money so I cannot worry about not paying the bills, but I also want to free up some time. Okay, how can I do both? And so the more I got into real estate investing, and I saw these different strategies, one thing kept coming up over and over again, and that was Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and how everyone would suggest that at the end of, Bigger Pockets videos, like, okay, what book would you suggest? And that always came up. I actually read the Cash Flow Quadrant before I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but in a sort of speaking, they're kind of the both sides of the same book. They're kind of talking about the same thing, albeit cash flow goes off on its own thing. But the point of all of this is that it just, as I like to call it, Kiyosaki and all this ruined my life in the most wonderful way. It's like everything I knew about security, making money, that kind of thing, and just my life and my path in my life just broke down and fell apart. But then I was able to start rebuilding it. And so that's where I am today, is I'm building these blocks. And of course, we can get more into that in the video, but that's essentially just how I came up to be where I am today, with having that spark of an investment mindset born.
Yeah. All right, that sounds pretty good. Cool. And a couple things you said there, like you mentioned Washington State, and you may have heard me say this at some point, but my oldest son, he's in the Coast Guard. He was stationed out there in Port Angeles, I guess.
Yeah.
And then he was stationed in Seattle as well. So he spent some time up there. And I think it was a year or two ago, it was the very first time he spent the winter months in Seattle, because he had been on an icebreaker, and an icebreaker always was in the Arctic or Antarctica during the winter months. But he spent the winter in Seattle, and he's like, wow, I understand now why so many people talk about Seattle being rainy and gray and depressing, because it was like that. So, but anyway, I know you mentioned you work in taxes. I've said it on my channel somewhere, I actually majored in business with they called it a concentration, kind of like a minor in accounting. So I do have a little background in accounting. And when I was in the Navy, the VITA program, Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program, I was like an instructor in the Navy to teach people how to do their taxes, like the basic, the 1040 easy or something. And I used to do taxes for some individuals like 30 years ago. So, but with that being said, enough on me. This video is about you. You have recently made what I consider a big move. You've something up here clicked, and you, for some reason, physically moved, mentally made a transition into something you're doing, a place you've gone, and something you're doing right now. So why don't you tell us how all that came about and where you're at right now?
Oh yeah, no, sure. So leaving off in Washington State, I started getting into real estate. That's where, in Bigger Pockets, I came across like Dion Talk. Financial Freedom is his YouTube here, channel here on YouTube, and he was featured in a Bigger Pockets episode, and just his way was just very relating to me. He came up through some debt, like not the best circumstances, and I felt I had that kind of reminiscent in my life, and so his approach to doing it was very realistic. It wasn't like a lot of the, when you have commercials turn on YouTube, you have like the Tai Lopez kind of people. You have like, check out this big car, check, all this flash and stuff, right? The whole Instagram rich, as people like to say. And it's like, okay, so you take a course and you become like a real estate millionaire. Okay, that, I don't know much about real estate, but when I was learning about that, but that doesn't quite sound right. That sounds a bit like a scam. But the way Dion had put it was very, very reasonable. So I'm like, okay. And also Airbnb was something like short-term rentals I was looking into. And so I went and got approved for some lending in Washington State. And one approval was for 200,000. And the other one was for like 300,000. And in Seattle, when you have homes like 2-bed, 1-bath starting at 500,000-600,000, you're gonna have to live in some pretty bad areas, right? And at that time, I have a kid, I have a wife. We are looking for like a safe place, but now that I'm not just looking for a house to live in. I'm looking for a house that can bring me that financial freedom, like I said before. So during that time of my YouTube exploration, and this is a free plug for this channel, but World According to Briggs is this guy who talks about different places in the US, the goods and the bads, usually the bads, because it gives them more ratings. People like to, look at the bads more than the goods, unfortunately, but he puts a comedic twist on them. And so it's entertaining, but it's informative. And he kept bringing up places around the East Coast that were good. And just about anywhere that are good. But the ones that he mentioned were the most affordable, and the ones that actually had some good relation to my profession were, well, East Coast, particularly North Carolina. And so North Carolina, as he's expressed and as I've seen, is huge for healthcare, but it's really big for finance, right? And so I'm in the finance adjacent, I guess you can say, in accounting and tax. You have Vanguard here, you have Vanguard there in North Carolina, and you also have like Bank of America's headquartered here, and that kind of thing. So I looked at it, I'm like, okay, when we're looking at North Carolina, it has a lot of stuff that we have, in the West Coast, in Washington State, it has tons of nature. It's not landlocked, so it has the ocean. And the beaches are actually walkable, like up in Washington State. A lot of the beaches are like rocks and seaweed, and it's just not really. You can't really lay out and get a tan without getting some kind of injury to your back, right? So I'm like, okay, this is looking good. All right, let's see. And this is the beginning of this year, right? When the real estate market's getting. That's when I was like, the tail end of last year and the beginning of this year, when the market's really crazy and interest rates are like 3% and everyone's getting home because they're able to borrow, right, cheaper. And so I reached out to a friend who lived here who knew a real estate agent, and she connected me to a lender, and she approved us for $300,000. And so we're like, okay, and at the beginning of the year, you can afford 4-bed, 2-bath for $300 here. It's ridiculously lower price for real estate here than in North Carolina here than it is in Western Washington. And so we decided to look to coming to North Carolina. And at the beginning of the year, we had the money to afford the homes, but they just kept going up and up and up and up. And we kept getting outbid. So we went back to Washington State. I worked more, saved more. We put together a better plan, a better budget. And then I was able to find myself a niche that I wanted to start working in with real estate investing, and that was house hacking through small multifamily. And of course, Dion gets a lot of things for that. And so I was able to find a duplex, and my verbiage here, as I'm explaining this, did spoil us a bit, but we actually got a duplex here in Winston-Salem, and that's where we are now, and we're house hacking. And so I was able to take my mortgage and make it less than my car payment through having a tenant on one side and us living on the other. And my car is a 2014 Toyota Camry, so it's not like a $800 monthly payment. It's like, I think the monthly payment is not including insurance, but the monthly payment's like $200, and our rent after we apply the tenants part is like 180 something. So it's pretty good trade, and that's house hacking, right? I'm living proof that house hacking is awesome. Even in a cheaper place, it still has a huge impact. So
Right. Yeah, I agree. And to me, I never knew about house hacking when I was a younger guy. And I never heard about it until after I had gotten started into real estate investing. But knowing what I know now, and I've talked about on my channel, if I could go back in time, back in 1998 when I bought my single family home in Virginia, instead of buying a single family home, I would have tried to find a duplex or a triplex to start off, then having someone pay my mortgage for me. But even now, as you know, you watch my channel, you've heard me mention that I may move outside of the United States. But before I even came to that decision, and I would say I'm 96% leaning in that direction. The other 4% lean is actually me selling this house I'm in now. And if I didn't move to the other country, move into a duplex somewhere just so I could reduce my housing cost, so I could explode my wealth, let's say. So it's something I've never done that before. I may never do it because I may move to the other country instead, but you're doing that now. So if you can talk a little bit about how that's played out for you in these last couple months, but kind of lead that into where do you see yourself going over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, well, we got really lucky with these the tenants we have. This place has a bit of a story. It's been a neighborhood that used to have a lot of drug houses, that kind of thing, but the neighborhood's been improving. And this unit that we're in used to be a unit that had some odd years ago, it had it was a drug house, but when I saw the video of it before I bought the house, and I had the inspector go through, it wasn't like, hey, it looks like there's some beakers here. There might have been a meth lab, and in the walls and in the flooring, it's I think it's some vinyl plank flooring here. I'm terrible with construction and stuff, so don't ask, but it looks good. It looks like hardwood floor. Some of them were kind of bowed up in some places, so they probably weren't set right. And there were some other things with the home. But yeah, the tenants are good. They've been paying on time. They're really nice. They're very open to us fixing issues in their unit. There were quite a few issues that we were left with. And the thing is, we got lucky. When you get inherited tenants, you can only do so much. It's going to be, you should be prepared for the worst case scenario. You should be prepared for the fact that you won't get rent on time. They might have to be drug out, kicking and screaming. Ours, as I talked to them, I found out that the prior owner is like, oh, we just need a person to be in the unit. So they didn't vet them. They didn't vet them. They said that. I'm like, so I asked him, like, so you weren't screened or anything? Like, no, I just showed that I just showed a couple job receipts or something. I'm like, wow, okay. We got really lucky. And I'm like, well, that's not happening from now on, when I rent this place out, which leads me to what my plan is. So our plan is kind of to perpetually house hack, right? So this place, as I said, takes care of most of the mortgage. It doesn't take care of all of it, but they are renting like 200 or so below market. So when the time comes up to bump it more up the market, we will be living for free, if not barely living to pay for it. And of course, you have to consider, like, since we do manage, we don't do property management, we do take 20% out. So that was a little bit of a tease earlier. Ideally, I think, we're paying maybe about $350 if you take out that 20% for vacancy and repairs, like you should do as a responsible, and that's of course if you're, well, that's if you're also doing property management, right, Mark? You still want to take that 20% if you have a property manager, right? Because you are going to be paying for that.
Yeah. But definitely. I hold out the 20% for vacancies, repairs, and capital expenditures. I also hold out, I pay my property managers 8% in Indiana or 10% in Alabama. So I hold, two different categories.
Yeah. So if I were to turn this over to a property manager someday, I would budget for that extra 10% in rent raises and that kind of thing. But anyway, so I found my niche, and it's a good idea just to stick with one thing until you really get it down. And my niche is small multifamily. So this one obviously counts. So 2 to 4 units. Here in my area, there's tons of duplexes. Every so often you'll get a triplex, and it's pretty rare that you'll find like a fourplex. And that's I do 2-bed, 1-bath minimum. So our plan would be I want to get a triplex next, but if I find some duplexes that are just awesome, we would move to there, and then we rent out this unit here. I mentioned to you the other day, I just saw a package deal for 2 duplexes, and it will be my first seller finance approach. And, they're going to make a decision today. So here's hoping, but if not, no big deal, because, there's also some single families, and I'm trying to stick just to multifamily. But if I do find like a good single family that's like a screaming deal, it's always okay in my mind to deviate, so long as you understand that property class, and you're not like, your mind's not so spread out too thin amongst things. But it is good to have a center focus, and then to move forward with that for a while, and that's what we want to do.
So That sounds good. And one question for you is, when you bought your duplex, did you use a lender right there in the Winston-Salem area, or is it like a nationwide lender?
Well, that's a good story. We almost lost the place because of a nationwide lender. And not saying that nationwide lenders aren't good, you just have to be sure on it. So it's always good to have a couple lenders just in case. The one that we initially went with, I'm not going to say any names, but everything was looking good. We were under contract for like, and in 3 weeks being under contract, they went to lock in the rate and everything, and they needed to use somebody that was more local to this area. Well, the person said to us when they're locking the rate, hey, you know, we found out that you are just making too much money for the area that the house is in. So you're going to have to do FHA. And, you know, that's the only loan that you can qualify for at the moment. I'm like, oh, wow. Okay. Well, FHA here, it still doesn't qualify for FHA. And I put like at least 8,000 into this place fixing it up. So, you know, we have to have money for closing and down payment. And then we have to have money for moving our stuff across the country. So it just didn't work. So I talked to my real estate agent who's in this area, who connected me to this property. I'm like, look, this is a situation. He's like, okay, I know this lender. He's more local. He's actually out of, I think they're out of Wilmington. Try them. I'm like, okay. So I went to that guy, and on the 11th hour, he was able to secure us with a package that was conventional, and it made us work, and it cost that. I think it was actually an interest rate that was a bit less than the one that we gone with before. So that was scary because we already put like a couple thousand down for, you know, the due diligence. And then if we want to do FHA and we wanted to stick to our guns with FHA, as I understood it, we could have had to pay for all this stuff to make it FHE passable. And they could have been like, you know, no, we're not going to sell it. And then they just keep all the repairs, because how are you going to undo the repairs? You know, and then we would have been out all this money. So it's like, okay, this has got to work. And we did give them an extra 1,000 to extend. We did give them an extra 1,000 on due diligence to extend the due diligence period. And of course, as I'm sure people know, whatever you pay in for that does come down as down payment on the property. So it doesn't just disappear. But at that point, we were like, okay, we're kind of tight. We don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars to just throw at what ifs and people not doing, excuse the phrasing, their due diligence for the sake of our due diligence.
Right. Yep, I see what you're saying. And one thing, as you get more farther into your real estate journey, as I have learned, I could tell story after story of issues with lenders, appraisers, property managers, tenants, and so on and so on. So yeah. But anyway, all right, well, cool. All right, so let me think what else then. I'll tell you what, this video, we're getting kind of towards the end here. So tell you what, how about at this point, I'm going to turn it back over to you. And instead of asking you a question, I'll let you kind of give an ending to this video with whatever it is you want to talk about. It could be anything at all.
Yeah, you know, I came in here having a topic in mind, Mark, and that was really just, you know, so many points, and it's probably still going to be going on for a while. There's so many points in my journey so far. It's just, you know, you kind of feel like you're doing it alone. You know, you feel like I have to come up with all this money on my own. And it's because a lot of people just, you know, you don't have a lot of options because you don't know of a lot of different paths. So I guess you could say my parting words is the best thing that I did, just how I found out where to be today and kind of where to go forward, is just, if you're interested in real estate investing, just go on to YouTube and like Bigger Pockets, Dion Talk, Financial Freedom, Mazske Finance, Lumberjack Landlord, Millennial Mike, and so many others that I should be remembering at the moment, but I can't. Of course, Financial Firefighter. the other Mark, the Mark with a C is awesome. He's great too. He's been a big help. But just learning people's stories and being exposed to that, you'll hear different types of paths to invest in. But take a note of what's appealing to you, and go on groups like Facebook and stuff, and generic groups, and just type and ask, say, I'm a new investor, I can only afford this much, what markets are good, what would you recommend? And then just start talking to people and building off of that, and then looking at the market. And say you go to just a nationwide Facebook group and they say, oh yeah, Gary, Indiana, it's got a bit of a troubled past, but it's coming back. Here's a real estate group, say like Investors in Gary, or and I don't think that's a real group, but we'll just say it is, Investors in Gary, Indiana. And then you join that group and you learn more and you meet people. And how I met you, Mark, was I met Dion, and then Dion suggested Millennial Mike, and then Millennial Mike talked about you, and then I started reaching out to you, and all those people were very responsive. So don't get deterred by people who aren't responsive. There's so many people in this community that want to help you, and so just stick with it. And no, it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over years. But what you should be doing every day is what people should be doing every day is to research their market, learn more, just listen to videos, even if it's in the background while you're eating or cleaning or working or whatever. And just grow that network, because when it comes to it and you're like, oh crap, this lender doesn't approve my lending for this. Oh, hey, there's this thing called seller financing or sub two. Hey, there's another one. Pace Morby is one if you want to get into the interesting things. But there's all these other paths. There's so many paths you can take. And I know, Mark, you've done seller financing. That's how you got a bunch of homes in Gary. I know you've done just conventional lending. And so it's just good to have options, and learn how to budget, learn how to save, because there is a big cost to entry, and that is usually the down payment. But once you get that going, like in 3 months, I already have like about, I would say, around $10,000 I can take on equity, and that's a down payment for some homes in some markets. So once you get the ball rolling, it can go, it can mount, and it can snowball, but you just have to just network with people, get to talk to people, learn about people, consume content. And then when you can find and pick a niche, you can go forward, and then you can keep growing on that niche. And I think I could talk about this forever. I could probably make this a 2-hour thing by just going on this, but I think I've made my point. I think it's just good to reach out, learn, and be engaging, because I like I've said, in like this property's taught me so far, real estate investing isn't a property business, it's a people business. And I'm just going to close with that.
All right, that sounds good. And Dave, you just said a lot of things in your ending there that we could dig into almost every comment and have a several-hour-long conversation. But we're not going to do that today. We'll do it sometime sitting down together. We can talk like that. But with that being said, you're at the beginning of your real estate journey. Sometimes I feel that with my channel, even though I'm still the small guy, when I say I went from 0 to 25 rentals in 4 years, I think for some people that might turn them off, because all of a sudden I did it too fast and they put me on a different pedestal. But with that being said, I'm the little guy, and I was buying my first rental property 5-6 years ago, not having a network, not having YouTube, not knowing what I was doing, and I made it to where I am today. You're at the beginning of your journey. I use the word journey a lot because this isn't a get rich quick scam. You're not going to get rich overnight. It's like taking that first step. You take the first step, you buy a duplex, you get some rent coming in, your housing expense has now decreased to just a little bit, less than your car payment. Time passes. While time's passing, you learn a little bit about construction, perhaps, because you're living in your house hack. At the same time, you enjoy your child because kids grow up so quick. But then maybe it's a year from now, 2 years from now, you buy another rental property. Maybe it's another duplex. You move again. Maybe it's a single family home. Whatever it turns out to be, that's the second step. Let's say you buy a duplex. Now you're getting 2 rent checks in, and your new duplex you're again getting free or reduced housing cost, but now you have 2 rent checks in. You have a property that is now cash flowing probably fairly well. It makes it easier to get your 3rd, your 4th, your 5th mortgages, because if you keep buying, you get more mortgages. But eventually you'll hear a lender tell you something like, maybe it's around number 5 or number 6 for mortgages. They might say something to you like, hey, our lending, your standards are getting a little stricter now. Your credit score maybe used to have to be at this level. Now it has to be a little bit higher. And now we're going to say, we're going to ask you to have reserves, not just small reserves, but a bigger pot of reserves. So we know you can afford to pay if there's problems in several different properties. But I love talking to someone like you because you're right at the beginning of your real estate journey. It's up to you where you go from here. It's not going to be easy. Some days it might seem easy. Some days you're going to struggle. Some days you might bang your head against the wall. It's like, what am I got myself into? But I can say with the utmost certainty, you or anyone out there watching, if you stick with it, you persevere, it's going to get better and better as time goes on. But even as time goes on, you're still going to struggle at times. But you persevere, you keep plugging away, and things will just get better and better. All right.
Yeah.
So anyway, with that being said, any final words, or you want to wrap this up?
Yeah, I think you complimented my parting words well. It's just, it's like if you're digging a tunnel, you don't know how close you are to getting out of the other side of the mountain, right? And you could be a shovelful away. You could be 200 shovelfuls away, but you keep digging away that dirt, and eventually you'll come out to where your goals are. I think it's important to set goals and to maintain those goals, and to just learn from people like you mentioned it's your playlist about how you got from 0 to 25 rentals in 4 years, and people are like, well, that's scary, but as the videos show, you did have some reserves from working and some savings, and that's the importance of saving. But you also recycled capital, and you also did some seller financing, and there are seller financing things out there that you can put 0 money down. The thing with seller financing is the terms can be really common, like you're in the Wild West where you can negotiate crazy legal things. They got to be legal, but as long as both parties agree, you can put 0 down, 2% interest for 60 years if the seller agrees with it and if it works. But make sure cash flows. And another channel I forgot to mention was 1 rental at a time, and don't ever buy an alligator property, right? And that's a property that you spend money, that eats money, but doesn't bring you back money. And we can talk more about that, obviously, but not this video. And I'm just going to end it at that. Yeah, just go out there, have fun, and learn.
All right, sounds good. Well, thanks so much, Dave. It's been great having you here. All right, audience. Well, thanks so much for watching. I'm sure you learned a lot. Oh, one last question, Dave. If someone wants to ask you a question, they can put it in the comments. I'm sure you'll see it and respond to it. But if someone wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Well, Instagram is probably the best way. You could type in Dividend Dave. I think it's Dividend_Dave, and I should come up. If not, you can let me know in the comments, and I'll give you a link.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks again, Dave, and thanks everyone for watching. So with that being said, for Dividend Dave and myself, this is Mazske Finance signing out.